We frequently discussed communication on this channel, but what is meta-communication? Supposedly, it is a great way to solve problems in communication, and today we'll find out how that works. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today I'd like to present meta-communication to you. So, how does it work? The idea is that during a conversation, you get on a higher level and you look down on the conversation as it unfolds and you try to figure out what is going on there. And you make the conversation itself the topic. This could be done, for example, by clarifying how you feel about the conversation, how you experience it. We do this unconsciously if we say something like, "Oh, this was a pleasant conversation, thank you," or "I enjoyed talking to you." And we can consciously do this. Let's say we are in an argument, for example, by saying, "I feel like I am cornered here and I have to justify myself and I feel like I'm in a really bad position here." Another approach would be to analyze and see if there is a mutual understanding and see if there are any patterns. An example for an unconscious use would be, let's say I have a conversation with a friend and I say something that is intended to be ironic or a joke, and my friend says, "Oh, are you serious?" And I say, no, it was meant as a joke. So my friend basically asks, "What you just said, how am I supposed to interpret that? Should I take it at face value, or is there something more to it?" And I clarify, yeah, there is something more to it. It is intended as a joke, so it's not to be taken at face value. And we can consciously do this. Let's say we are in another argument by saying, what just happens? This follows the same pattern as it always does when we are in an argument. And if we continue like this, it will end with slamming doors and us being angry at each other. And tomorrow we will both be very sorry. And how about we break up this usual pattern and we do things differently this time? Another approach would be to focus on the question, where do we actually want to go with this conversation? What is our goal? Imagine, for example, a business meeting and one participant says, "Wait a moment, we've been talking about something that is entirely off topic for 15 minutes now, and we originally came together to clarify, question, whatever, and shouldn't we get back to that now?" So, where does meta-communication come from and where does it appear? It is discussed by Schulz von Thun in Miteinander reden, the first volume, which is unfortunately, as mentioned before, not available in English except to companies. Schulz von Thun describes how meta-communication works, and he also states that it is a good method to solve problems in communication, and he also gives a warning. He says it shouldn't be used as some kind of shouldn't be used in a way like, "Oh, your relationship message is somewhat inconsistent, isn't it?" So we shouldn't use it to try to impress people or anything like that, but we should use it as a tool to improve the situation for everybody. It doesn't appear again in Schulz von Thun's other works, at least not in those I've read, so it isn't discussed extensively. Originally, I had intended the video to be a Schulz von Thun video, Meta-Communication by Schulz von Thun, but I changed this plan after I noticed it isn't discussed extensively by him, and also the topic in general isn't big and complex enough to allow for multiple videos. So I made that change. I think last week I still announced it as Meta Communication by Schulz von Thun. So sorry for the confusion. According to Wikipedia, meta communication appears a lot in Watzlawik's works and also in Gestalt Therapy by Wolfgang Metzger. However, in regard to Watzlawick, I didn't encounter it a lot so far, and I don't know a lot about Gestalt Therapy, so I can't comment on those. The term was made popular by one Gregory Bateson, and it was originally created by one Benjamin Lee Whorf. However, they used the term in a slightly different sense. Today, as I just explained, we understand it as a technique that we consciously use. And for them, it was more of a phenomenon. So, for example, body language was to them also a form of meta communication, because body language provides hints about how our spoken words are supposed to be interpreted. For example, imagine a father who says to his kids, "Tidy up your room." The kids will, according to his tone of voice, the loudness of his voice, the color of his face, his posture, and so on, this will allow the kids to understand whether this is meant as a friendly suggestion or something more specific. So how can we use meta communication? A very important prerequisite is that we are able to create some inner distance, that even in a heated discussion, we are able to mentally take a step back and look at the situation from outside as a neutral observer. This is an ability that occurs frequently in soft skills, and that is quite important. For example, it is also relevant in mental stress management, which we discussed in How to Deal with Stress Part 3, where you also take a step back in a situation of immediate stress and look at the situation as an observer and then maybe apply reframing and so on. And it is also an important aspect of mindfulness. In mindfulness, it is very important that you learn to observe your thoughts and your feelings, and that you are able to just let them move past without getting into them and getting carried away by them. And mindfulness can also be used to cultivate this ability. You could have a look at, for example, Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn, which I reviewed recently. So this is an important ability, and it is also important for meta communication. Kind of a first step to that is that we are able to take responsibility for the message we receive, so that we understand that what we hear and the way we feel about that is a product of our own interpretation, and it is not necessarily what was meant and intended by the other party. This is discussed by Schulz von Thun a lot. We talked about it in the video about the 4 sides of a message, and also in the video about problems in communication. Furthermore, we obviously need to be able to make the conversation itself the topic and leave aside the actual topic for a moment. This might be difficult if the actual topic is very important to you, or if you are strongly emotionally involved. However, you need to be able to make a clear cut for a moment, focus on the conversation itself, and leave aside the actual topic. You also need to be open to some extent. You need to be able to express your feelings about the conversation, how you experience the conversation, and you also need to be able to openly accept the experiences of the other participants. For example, you shouldn't say, "Oh, you totally misunderstood that. That was not how I meant, what I meant," but you need to just accept that this is the way the other person experienced the conversation, and therefore it is a fact and you need to accept it. A good general direction when you start using meta-communication is to create a mutual understanding first, to figure out how the other participants experience the conversation, maybe if they feel uneasy about it, if they would like to do things differently, and to create a mutual understanding. Remember Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, I think it was habit number 5, where he says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think this is a good general direction when starting meta-communication. By the way, we used meta-communication before in this channel when we discussed the vicious circles by Schulz von Thun. When we talked about how to get out of a vicious circle, I mentioned that it is helpful not to respond to the outward behavior of the other party, but to talk about your own inner experience. In the example we had back then, there was a superior who had problems with an employee, and he shouldn't say something like, oh, because you are so touchy and stubborn, I have to push back and restrain you as your superior. But he should try to say something like, when I see your behavior, this makes me feel not acknowledged as your superior and not respected, and I feel indignant. And this is why I react this way. This is where my behavior is coming from. And this is also a form of meta-communication, even so we didn't call it by its name back then. I mentioned several videos in this one. I will provide links in the video description in case you want to have a look at one of them. Have you encountered meta-communication before? Did you know the technique already? Have you maybe tried it before? Please let me know in the comments. I'm looking forward to your feedback. If you enjoyed the video, I would greatly appreciate a like, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are plenty more exciting videos about soft skill topics to come, such as next week, when we have a book review of Games People Play by Eric Berne. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.